I am the president of the Swedish Organization for Home Education. That sounds very impressive. We're 100 members and about 5 active board members. Well, maybe 3, maybe actually 1 at times. I have a slide presentation, so as there's no overhead projector, I've been given a few extra minutes. We'll have to read out some things from the slide for you. Home education is the fastest growing form of education in the world. I think you all know that. Home education is no longer merely an alternative form of education. It is actually, or an alternative lifestyle. I would say that home education today is a spearhead of social change that forever will change our understanding of families and how children learn. This is a fundamental change. We are seeing that schools do not work, and we are looking in the knowledge society for something new. We all know that home education is highly successful, and both academically and socially. And we know that this is a time of learning whose time has come. And it's kind of like a new paradigm. And the headline for what I'm about to speak is Home Education in Sweden, New Law, New Threats, New Possibilities. And just short about me, I've also written a book on the theme of families, and I'm actually in my own country more known for that book and for a more general critique of Swedish family policies. The title of the book is Following Your Heart in the Social Utopia of Sweden, and the hint behind the topic is that's difficult. Following your heart is difficult in Sweden because the Swedish state thinks it believes how families function best and would like to decide for you. And this spring I've actually toured the world and spoken my critique of Swedish family policies. In 6 months I've been in Italy, Hungary, Canada, Lisbon, Portugal, in Cascais in Portugal, New York and in Brussels. And I've actually been both to the United Nations and to the European Commission workshops. So I'm internationally more known for that. But every time, be sure that I mention home education and how home education is treated in Sweden and how home education kind of is the spearhead of families. That's the ultimate test for a family policy. Do you allow home education? Do you trust healthy parents to bring up their children on their own? I founded the Mireia Institute think tank, on whose homepage you'll find my presentations, many of them. I worked as a management consultant since 1981, and basically many of the experiences I've made there is what's made me go towards home education, because I realized, human potential has been my passion as a consultant, realizing human potential. And if you're going to realize human potential, you don't send your children to school. You do something else with them in many cases. I'm a Swedish representative of the Neufeld Institute. Some of you know about Dr. Gordon Neufeld, a Canadian psychologist. And if you don't know about him, then he's worth looking into, because he's a psychologist who will give you a psychological explanation why home education is so successful, both academically and socially. And it's a sound explanation which gives a whole other paradigm to socialization, because his idea of how socialization happens is completely different from how it happens in schools. I'm also a member of the National Board of HARO, which is a Swedish family organization who's working for early child care in families. And they are the ones who sent me to the UN and to the European Commission. I'm married to Tamara, and we have 3 children who are 7, 12, and 16. And Rebecca here is my daughter. I'm very happy. You have to turn around, Rebecca, so people can see you. And she's homeschooled 3 years legally and 3 years illegally. and you're going to find there's a bit of a contradiction in my speak here. You will hear of some pretty serious threats to homeschoolers in Sweden. And there are many sleepless nights we've had as homeschoolers in Sweden in the last couple of years, especially the last year. But we've gotten support, and we've come to see that the authorities are not actually as dangerous as they would like to make themselves seem. And we have gained a lot of confidence in, like I was told this morning, by being whipped by the authorities. We have, felt that we're doing okay. And is this the only whipping we're going to take? We'll take it, because it's worth it. So I have 2 pictures here I can't show you. Yes, I have a picture here of some of the homeschooling situation at home, and I write here, and I think this is important in this. I'm not a political conservative. I was born and raised leftist social democrat, and you Europeans know what that means, really on the left side, reading Karl Marx and stuff like that. I'm not a family traditionalist. My family had very little of traditions. I got a definitely good early childhood, but there was nothing of that. There's no such traditions, and especially not in Sweden. I was raised in an atheist family, so I don't have any religious reasons for this. My pure and sole motivation for homeschooling my children is what I've seen it does to them. Is seeing every day how well they learn, how happy they are, how creative they are, how energetic they are, and how hungry for life they are. That's all the conviction I've needed, and that's conviction enough. With all respect for any other conviction you may have, I think that's the ultimate reason why we want to homeschool. I have a slide here saying that school was education for the industrial society. Home education initiates an education revolution in the knowledge society. And as a consultant, I worked a lot about talking about changes going from industrial society to knowledge society. And I'm an optimist, and I believe what we're witnessing now in schools is a breakdown of an institution that will not survive the knowledge society. We may see other forms than home education, but home education seems to be the initiator of the whole new way of regarding education. And when we use the word home in home education, for me it's important to see that this is not about the geographical place, home. This is about the relationship place, home. And you have the relationships, and you can take your children and go anywhere in the world. It's not geography, it's the relationship home we're talking about in homeschooling. And in that sense, I think it's an important term to use when we're talking about this form. It's the relationships of home that are important. Something short about homeschooling in Sweden. Homeschooling has never been very big in Sweden. We've never been above 100 people in 10 million. So I talked to somebody from Ibiza this morning, and they said that on Ibiza there's 100,000 people, and they've got about, 10 or 20 homeschoolers. In a Swedish city of 100,000 people, there's maybe one homeschooled child. It's 100 in about 10 million inhabitants. And I would say now, after the new law, when several families have fled Sweden, we expect that about 12 families with 25 children have gone in exile to other Nordic countries like Finland, Norway, Denmark, and also one family to Canada. And so we've kind of gone down. We're probably not more than about 75 today. So it's very small in Sweden. Sweden's law has been permissive until 2010, but the law has been interpreted in a very non-permissive way. It requires a fully satisfactory alternative to school, and some municipalities in Sweden say, you can do that, we believe that. Others say, parents can never, ever provide a fully satisfactory to school. we live in such a municipality, so we have had a lot of struggles for our homeschooling. We have a new law taking effect on July the 1st, so we don't really know because we've sent in our applications now in Sweden. So how are they going to do? We don't know, but we think we've put up such a good fight that we believe the Swedish authorities understand that maybe this is not possible to push through. We just may have to give up here because what are we going to do? Are we going to fine them more than 25,000 euros? No? Are we going to put them to jail, which the new law makes possible? Are we going to try social custody again? The 2 cases we've had have been an enormous media exposure about. So we believe, or we hope, that the government is shaking a bit, and the typical Swedish way to handle this would be to not change the law, because that would be too proud for that, but to somehow tolerate it under some strange interpretation. So that's what we can hope for. And generally, Sweden is very family-phobic. I heard from Italy here a moment ago, and seems similar there. 92% of our 18-month to 5-year-olds are in daycare, strongly encouraged by our government. It's very rare to see a 2-year-old out of daycare, very rare. And the social authorities in Sweden regard you with suspicion if you haven't put your 2-year-old in daycare. And if they've got any single little reason to look at you, they will question directly, why didn't you have your child in daycare? And in the verdict of the infamous Dominic Johansson case, I've read the verdict, they actually say that the boy has been damaged by not going to preschool. Short of the history of Rohus, the date where everything changed is April 8th, 2008. Before April 8th, 2008, Swedish homeschoolers were what I sense European homeschoolers are at. They try to say as little as possible about it, hoping that the authorities will not look at it and not come with any, difficult rulings. And the more quiet we are, the more safe we are. I had the sense already before that this is dangerous, They can just come and do like this with us if nobody knows about it. On April the 8th, 2008, our Minister of Education went on TV and said, he took the example of a few religious families who had applied for homeschooling and then put their children in a school, a private, illegal school, and see, this is a misuse of the law. And he said, I'm going to look at the possibilities to forbid homeschooling for philosophical or religious reasons. And the school law a year later showed that, yes, he was going to do that. We fought the law as hard as we could, and we were not successful, unfortunately. The law went through. We were especially disappointed at the Christian Democrats, who have positioned themselves as a family-friendly party, who basically wrote about it like it was signed by the Minister of Education, who is liberal, by the way. It's very interesting, We have a liberal party who wants coercion more than any other party. 1 month after this, we formed Rohus, and we were quickly acknowledged by the government, and they sent us a consideration of the new school law. So we were publicly considering the new school law for the government. We put in 250 pages, and when the new law came out, they commented that we had sent in a consideration, but it was obvious from the reasoning that they hadn't actually read it, because they could never have motivated the law with what they said. Basically, the motivation for the law is that there is no need for a separate law on homeschooling in Sweden, as Swedish schools are objective and comprehensive. So no parent should have any fear sending their children to a Swedish school because it's objective and neutral. The interesting thing is that Swedish schools don't even attempt to be this. We have a very strong gender feminist agenda in Swedish schools, trying to make boys and girls alike. There's a form of sexual education being introduced into Swedish schools, you don't have to be religious. You just have to be a sensitive parent to realize that this is way, way, way over the top of what you presented to a 12 or 13-year-old. So it definitely has opinions, but that's how it was. The laws we use when we talk is, of course, we mention the UN Declaration of Human Rights. We quote Werner Munoz, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Education, where he says that homeschooling represents a valid option in his critique of Germany. And what we're trying to do now is to use the European Convention in the following interpretation. The first line says that everybody has a right to education. Then it says that the state has to respect the family's philosophical and religious conviction. And of course the thing is, what is education? What the Swedish government is trying to say is, we define what education is. And education is Swedish schools, period. But anybody who thinks a little here realizes that that would be a circular argument. You can define school as anything you want and then say that, well, that's education. So we don't need to respect philosophical or religious convictions. So we're saying the correct interpretation of the European Convention must be that education is defined as an internationally accepted form of education in a democratic country. Now, you go to a lot of countries, homeschooling is tolerated or accepted, legal, and you look at the UN rapporteur on the rights of education, and he says that homeschooling is a valid option. So, reasonably then, the European Convention should say that everybody has a right to education, and homeschooling is such a valid option. And from then on, it should be settled. The thing is that Sweden has adopted the European Convention as a law. Not only as a law, but as a quasi-constitution. Sweden has no constitution. In Sweden, the government has the right to do whatever they want. But the government in 1995 took in the European Convention as a Swedish law, and all other laws should look to the European Convention. If there's a disagreement, the European Convention holds as a law. It's a quasi-constitution according to our lawyer. So what we're pushing now is saying basically that the new law demanding special circumstances has, of course, to be interpreted in the light of the European Convention, and then a philosophical or religious conviction must be regarded as an extraordinary circumstance, a special circumstance. And how this is going to go, we don't know, but with the support from the HSLDA, we have 2 cases now that we are pushing and seeing what they will say about this. And those of us who are left in Sweden, we are pretty, I don't know how it comes, but we're pretty certain that we're going to win this somehow. We feel we've tired them out, basically. What are they going to do, you know? What are they going to do at this point? It also helps that media is favorable to us in Sweden. They think this is kind of exciting with this conflict, you know, and they want to come in, and when they make, you know, at home, coming into people's homes and making a reportage about this homeschooling family, they generally turn out very well and very pleasing. And, you know, this wonderful family doing this with these wonderful children, you know, what could be wrong, you know? On the editorial pages, though, you can see the usual, like, you know, this must be forbidden, and, you know the works. So, the old law on Swedish home education said that permission shall be given if it's a fully satisfactory alternative to what is stated in this law, which of course must be interpreted as you can do whatever you want as long as it's in a satisfactory. You don't even have to follow the law as long as it's a fully satisfactory alternative. It also demands that the authorities have insight into what you're doing. And there's no way of doing this in Sweden. It's different from commune to commune, from municipality to municipality. But typically, a teacher will come home once and twice a year and kind of see how things are going. And they complain about that the children will not be socially trained. You know that. You've heard that, right? Socially trained is the term in Sweden. What about social training? And you can... You're laughing. For a 12-year-old, it's so extremely ridiculous because it's so obvious, that you're socially competent as a homeschooler. What is added in the new law is simply extraordinary circumstances. So there has to be extraordinary circumstances. And this is where we're basically pushing for, we have a philosophical conviction or a religious conviction. That must be an extraordinary circumstance. Now, we might come back to you in 6 months and say, we lost it all, they're getting terrible, but so far we have our spirits up. And I've made a picture here, you can't see it, but if you translate, no, you can't see it, it's too small. I've translated the numbers to the Swedish population. So number of homeschoolers per 9 million inhabitants. It's kind of per capita. So, in Sweden there might be 75. I think in Germany there is 65 per 9 million. In Norway there's 800. So already Norway has 10 times as many as Sweden. And in Norway, Finland and Denmark, homeschooling is allowed. No problems. And then, of course, if you go to places like England, you're up to 5,000 or 7,000. And then if you go to New Zealand, you've got 15,000. And you go to the US, you've got 45,000. If we were like the US, we would have 45,000 homeschooled pupils in children in Sweden, which is, of course, enormous. Just in my city, we would have 900. Rebecca, if Uppsala was like America, there would be 900 children in our town being homeschooled. There are 2 at the moment, illegally. I've checked this through, and what I've listened to here doesn't seem to say that this is wrong. Sweden seems to be the only country in history with a deliberate intention to outlaw home education under democratic rule. I'll say that again. Sweden seems to be the only country in history with a deliberate intention to outlaw home education under democratic rule. I haven't heard any other country. No. Which other ones? Deliberate intention. I think what I'm trying to say here is, I don't know how that was in Holland, we can discuss that afterwards, but our Ministry of Education has says he wants to stop this all, and he wants to shut all vectors. It's a very deliberate intention. And we've managed to find a way to express this when I talk about this in Sweden, which is accepted. This is how I put it, and when I gave a lecture about homeschooling in Sweden some months ago. I say in 1938, the German chancellor at the time decided to forbid home education. In 2011, the Swedish Minister of Education decided to forbid home education. You cannot say the name of the German chancellor, that destroys it, but if you put it that way, it works. Our Minister of Education has no mustache. A key factor in here seems to be socialization. And what we found in Sweden, we found that there's actually a new paradigm, a whole new way of thinking how children are socialized. And this is, we've got a lot of help here from the Canadian psychologist, Dr. Gordon Neufeld. Maybe he has his book translated even to Spanish, I don't know, maybe not. His book is translated to 8 languages anyway. And what you get from that is, he will basically say that social competence is not achieved through social activity. In fact, social competence cannot be achieved by cognitive means at all. Social competence is a process of maturation nourished by love and attachment and closeness. It's actually a function of the brain in the prefrontal cortex where you learn to take in 2 feelings at the same time. It's the process when you can feel your own feelings and the persons of another, and then, get out how to do it. this process is often impeded in schools due to too much stress, too many friends, and too many peers, and too few adults. He says that peer orientation is what happens in school today when there are age-segregated groups, many groups of the same age with few adults. The children have to find emotional support in one another, which they cannot provide. Bullying and all of these things come from this. And in this way, peer orientation may actually be the biggest hindrance to socialization today. And now, how can one do that? Well, home education supplies a loving adult with enormous, much more experience than their peers in school, and they can guide young people through whatever emotions they come through with love and with care. A parent will love a child who's done a big mistake as well as being a big success. They can handle it all. And this is the key thing. And this is, of course, something that homeschooling can offer, and it doesn't matter what you believe in. The key thing, you're there for your child, and you take care of them fully. And they're not fully mature until they can, as Dr. Norfield puts it, they can mix without blending with others. They can mix with others, be with others, without losing themselves. And that's a process that usually takes till about 18, 20 years of age until you fully can do that. So I think this paradigm is in a way a key thing to understanding. Once the world understands how socialization happens, in a way school in the form we know it today is dead. You can say that there are basically two ways the Swedish authorities today have to deal with this. It's either fines or it's social authorities or it's both. In my municipality they use fines, so our family has gotten this 25,000 euro fine, which has been approved by the highest court in Sweden. The only thing the municipality has to do now is to send us, a demand for 25,000 euros. We're quite convinced that they don't dare to do it. And in such a way, the only thing they've done is made us stronger than ever, because they realize they cannot do this. And we have got support in our organization from some rich people sending us quite a lot of money saying, use this to pay any fines. So there's support within Sweden who think this is a good thing you're doing. Just stand up to it. There's a family in Stockholm who's had 3 social investigations in 1.5 years. They're just convinced to find something wrong about them. It's a great family. I don't know how they dare to stay, but they do. Most people in Sweden, once they hear that the school is going to do a social investigation, next day they go to Finland or someplace else and write themselves there. It's very easy, They call you and says, we want to see you next week and talk about this to start a social investigation. You say, fine, we'll be there. Then you take the boat to Åland, which is a Finnish island, 2 hours away. And you don't have to do anything more than to go in there and say, we want to live here. Okay, they say. If you got an address, you find an address for some homeschooler on Åland, you write yourself there, and you're safe. So this is, again, we've got a very close collaboration between the Nordic countries. You can move around as you want, but the homeschooling laws are extremely different. And we are pretty sure that the Ministry of Education never saw this possibility. And there's been TV specials on these families moving there. They're getting tired of having TV coming and interviewing them because there's so many of them, And you see these happy children. Yeah. So what you're saying is that the Swedish are brainwashed by the system. But I think that's not only Sweden. That's many nations have that. Maybe we're extreme in our country. So how this new Swedish school law is to be interpreted, we don't know. We'll know in 6 to 12 months from now. We have sent in our applications. For our youngest son who starts school now is 7, the principal called and said, where's your son? He's supposed to be in school now. And then we said, we've applied for home education. Oh, well, I've got to report this. So I realized there was danger here. So I called her back and said, I think you should talk to Hanna Asp, our municipality lawyer. She knows all about the family Himmelstrand. She said, thank you for giving me a name to call to. And this Hanna Asp is going to tell her that the family Himmelstrand is the most impossible family we've ever had to deal with, but she doesn't have to do anything, they're dealing with it or trying to deal with it. We're optimistic, and I think what's helped us to kind of keep the authorities down is all the international support. We've got some very good letters written by Mike here from the HSLDA to the Swedish Parliament, a very well-written letter, and I think they were kind of shaken up. When we had the demonstration, when they were taking the law, I spoke to some parliamentarians, and they said that basically the international is what works. The international critique, that works. Keep on doing that. They don't like that. They don't like being criticized for being unliberal or unsocial in Sweden. If you see some positive signs in Sweden, in spite of all the families fleeing from Sweden, and we've had at least 2 or 3 families who've gone overnight after they've got in touch with the social authorities. Social authorities in Sweden recently got a new law to support them. They are allowed to interview a child without the parents present. That's only 1 year old, that law. And one family, they wanted to use that. They said, we won't accept that. And then they left. Although there may be struggles ahead, there's going to be struggles ahead, I believe, in many countries. It is our conviction in Rohus that there is no way in which home education can be stopped. I think we've had a European situation. We got the whole Swedish government against us. We fought it. We haven't been successful in changing the law, but we've made some respect, and we don't think that they dare to come after us. And after listening to what I hear here, there is no way that home education can be stopped in Europe, I am convinced. But there may be some tough struggles ahead, and we may need to unite even more than we do now. But we must not be afraid. It's important to see that I believe we're part of a historic movement to change things in the knowledge society. School cannot survive only in a knowledge society. There has to be alternatives for many children, and maybe we're going to see new things too, but there's something happening here. So I think that's pretty much final. Home education is here to stay and to grow. And in Sweden, I would say that the homeschooling movement is probably the strongest freedom movement we've had in Sweden in 100 years. And more people are accepting this. Thank you very much. Thank you.